Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Agent, coming to you after our episode 9, which we obviously did in person, myself and Stephen, covering a variety of different topics that we're in day to day. And one area specifically was around founder life. And we had a few requests come in and questions around how we've built our AI native agencies in 25 and 26. So we're going to cover a few different topics here, but AI native agencies, Stephen, I don't know how you're thinking about it, but it's definitely a hot topic at the moment.
I think so. And first of all, I'm amazed that we got to 10 episodes already. That's quite a bit of content that we got
Come
through.
on.
And yeah, double figures. And yeah, I mean, I've heard the term AI native being used probably for about 12 months now in relation to agencies. And also this idea of, software as a service or data as a service, or just thinking about ways that you can scale out a service-led business that, you just couldn't have done pre-AI or pre this current sort of version of AI that we've got, because it just wouldn't have been possible to do all of that work for brands or for companies without the headcount. So it's a really interesting time. I don't think that means, like saying you're doing it without headcount. I don't think that means that loads of jobs all of a sudden disappear because of this. I actually think it's just a case that loads more things can be done with the existing headcount that you've got within inside your company or the agency that you're building. So yeah, super interesting time to be doing what we're doing, and I think lots of interesting stuff that we can talk about on this topic today.
Or services or software, it's really come about obviously with the introduction of AI. Previously, what would happen is, as a media agency, marketing agency, you would land business, you would have to hire heads against that to obviously fulfill the workloads and support the clients. Now with AI and AI native agencies and technology that's available, you can now really scale up your operations, utilizing technology to do a lot of the grunt work, a lot of the heavy lifting, which was typically the day to day kind of monotonous, repeatable tasks that took up a lot of time. So previously, it was really around billable hours. Margin was obviously capped by headcount, and it scales linearly. Now we're in a position where having an AI native agency, you can obviously still handle the service, but the production layer itself is agentic, and we do a lot of this. Obviously, both agencies that we're working at, really getting AI to focus on what are the tasks that take up a lot of time, so that we can kind of take a step back and really focus on the strategy and what are we ultimately looking to achieve for our clients. So services as software, this was actually something which came out, I don't know whether you've seen it, Stephen, by Y Combinator. They
Yes.
did a really interesting YouTube video on this, around how to build organizations like this. And it's really taking that SaaS model, but adapting it for this new world, and in particular for service-led businesses. So it's a relatively new phenomenon. Well, it's been around for a while, but it's definitely accelerated more
Yeah.
recently.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of things I'll pick up on there. So I think, on the right box, we've got, production layer is agentic, but humans do the strategy and judgment. I think that's why, the sort of services of software is a proposition, because you take this to the nth degree and you say, well, actually just AI does everything. And what we know is, if you try and use AI without having the strategy, the judgment, the insight, the knowledge about what you should be building, then it doesn't really build you what you want it to build. So actually, what's not going to happen in the short term anyway is companies just creating all their own content with ChatGPT, anyone doing it randomly. Like, there needs to be a system and a process and a whole bunch of really good inputs that go in to get the really high grade outputs out the other end of it. And so that's why I think services or software, the sort of prop, that's why that prop exists, the strategy and the judgment layer that comes from a human. I think that's probably still true for quite a long time. And
Yeah.
I don't mean hundreds of years, but at least the next few years, I think it's going to be really important for that. Who knows where we go from there? I think the other day I was talking to a friend of mine. He said there'd been over the last 3 months, like model updates across all the different AI tools once every 2 days, which is kind of wild. I think you still need human in the loop, and you still need the human strategy and judgment. And I actually think what gets really interesting building AI native agencies is if you're someone who is like a strategic doer. I'd see myself as that. Like I like thinking about strategically what's the right thing to do, but actually doing the implementation as well. So I'm not just the implementation, I'm not just on the strategy side, but actually a strategic to it. AI is perfect for me because it's helping me to actually do that,
Mhm.
implementation bit at scale, which is then much more like a product that you've detailed in terms of the margins and the way you can scale it. So really interesting time I think to be doing this. And then the big question is, how big a team do you need? Like when do you hire people? Yeah, in the past, as you said, you maybe win business and immediately go and hire people to deliver on that business. That's not how it works now. So, you win business and then you're figuring out how you can actually deliver that business with AI. And then at a certain point in time, of course, you are going to need more people, but it's changing when that question needs to be answered.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen it across the market. There's a lot of like new technologies that are being implemented, and the reason being is it's the barriers to entry for building tech have gone. So no longer have to hire huge dev teams, software developers. You can really utilize these tools to do that. So product-led growth has been this massive phenomenon, getting products out to market, building cohorts, getting users using it, take to market the MVP, and then really scale out from there. But I think the dynamic we have, especially in the industries we work in, AI search, agentic commerce, advertising, and LLMs, it's so dynamic and changing so frequently, as you mentioned with the models, that you really need that service layer to interpret those changes. Be-
100%.
because we're at the very edge of this. We're like in it day to day. If you kind of look at your clients, they're often 4 or 5 times removed. So the stuff that we're talking about, which happens daily, they're still a long way behind. So you need that service layer to interpret it, adjust the strategy, and then help implement it. So
Definitely.
definitely a lot of technology out there, but I think the winners are going to be those that have this kind of service layer embedded as well.
I agree.
Uh,
I
yeah,
agree. And then I mean, we're definitely going through a form of short revolution with AI in terms of it transforming how businesses and organizations are set up. And I read this book called, I think it was the Four Industrial Revolutions or something like that. And it just talked about all these different ones that we've been through, and there's been many before. And maybe PCs and the internet would be maybe one of the ones that we've been through recently. But way back when there was a transition from steam engines to electric motors, and at the beginning, all the factories just put the electric motors in and it made the working conditions nicer, but didn't really change productivity. And then when they built new factories, or when people decided to build new factories, they built them differently with the electric motors, and then productivity absolutely skyrocketed. And I
yeah,
think we're at the moment right now where we're sort of putting AI into existing businesses, and it's like not really having a material impact on productivity yet, or
yeah.
certainly at the
Uh-huh.
top level. There are definitely businesses who are having a material impact, but it'll only be when new organizations are built from the ground up, from scratch, with AI as AI native, that actually, the productivity game will completely change, or should, in theory. So I think we're living that right now, me and you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're in a unique position. We obviously talked about Brain Labs in the last episode. I think what they've done is phenomenal for such a large organization, like 1,000 people, but being able to transition to AI native. And some of the examples they gave were really, really good. I think most organizations are struggling to do that, and they're bolting on AI and talking about AI. A lot of cool marketing collateral, but fundamentally
Yeah,
the foundations are still the same.
yeah, struggling to become AI native because they're still using Copilot.
Yeah, that's true. But organizations now, and we talked about this last episode, right? Now is the best time in the history of work conditions, I would say, to be a founder, because you're at a really unique advantage that if you are lean, you are a 1, 2 person organization, you can start from scratch being AI native and really just go wild from there.
I, I
Uh,
I agree. I think I'm not saying it's. She do think that is the case, and very sort of bullish on people who are starting out now, doing businesses like we are in an AI native way. I think the challenge that comes with that though is because everything is so easy to build. Like an idea comes into my head, like in the middle of this podcast, I'll be like, oh yeah, I could. That's a thing I could add. And I'm like, then I like today, as well as all the other things that I was going to do, reply to emails, do some billable work for clients, maybe do some outbound. I'm also going to build a tool because I've figured out that there's something that I can build that I wasn't planning on doing today, but because I had the idea and now I'm just going to try and run it in the background. And then I end up running like I was having this like, right, I'll set one thing off on Claude. It starts running. It's a bit like back in the early days on the internet with like the browser loading, right? You're like waiting for the page to come through. You're like, oh, it's doing the thing. It'll get there. It's cooking. But like, unlike back in the early 2000s with the internet, like you can open multiple chats and just start multiple things. Like, whereas, back with
Yeah.
Netscape,
Uh-huh.
adding more tabs, trying to open more tabs wasn't going to help with your bandwidth. But so I'll end up with like 5 different tasks running in parallel. And I'm like, oh, I can't remember, what was the first one I started? And what was I trying to do with it again? And like my brain's like doing this weird loop of trying to keep up with all of the different things that I've tried to start in the space of 30 minutes. So that's, I think, the only downside. So if you can tolerate that and you can get comfortable with that way of working, then there's never been
Away
a
you
better
go.
time to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's when you've got 5 or 6 terminals open and you're doing agentic workflows with fleets of agents. It's often the handbrake's off and let the
I
agents
know.
do it. But
It's funny because I'm heavy on co-work. Like I do a little bit with Claude Code, not loads, but like really heavy on co-work, like loads of scheduled tasks, lots of different skills built for various different things. Went really hard on Fable last week or so or last 4 or 5 days, and like that's like my obviously with Claude Code. Now the thing with cowork is you need your laptop open, and I'm doing
mm,
some stuff where I need to. I'm actually doing work in the browser as well, like letting Claude go to a website, pull some information for me if I need it to do some research.
nice.
And I get kind of getting annoyed with in my browser. I was thinking I just need to buy another laptop and then like have one that runs everything, like is running in the browser and is always open and always on, and then have my other laptop that I actually take around with me and do work. But probably the answer to that is I should just move to Claude Code and let everything run in the background instead of having to have my laptop open. But we'll see.
There you go. And then fire up Dispatch and just let it go
Exactly.
wild.
That's it. Like
Yeah,
an always
it's
on. I should just get an always on MacBook Pro at home that's just always there for me to run dispatch from my mobile whenever I need to.
I'll be using that for the golf course.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it is interesting. It is fascinating to see. I think the productivity has gone up, but you're right. You can go in so many different directions. But just myself today, I've built like 3 or 4 new skills in Claude, which is going to automate a lot of my outbound and inbound in terms of
Awesome.
like being much more personalized in the response. Putting together legal contracts. I've hired someone today, so putting together that documentation, written a 1-pager that we're distributing around some of our partners, and we also set up a referral agreement as well.
Awesome.
So all of that is like how you're probably talking like a month if you're dealing with lawyers, if you're dealing with like marketing teams, designers. It's just all now at within your kind of grasp. It's in a central operating system, Claude, which you can just fire off and do so much work with it. So it's pretty wild. Also moving into, so we've obviously covered a few areas around AI native agencies. I think the key thing, and I've worked with coaches once I set up Blackbird, is to think about margin explicitly, think about what that exit multiple looks like, but also like have a reverse timeline. So what do you want to do with your company? Do you want to exit, and when do you want to exit, and for what price? And then kind of work backwards from that. So I think one of the key things running an AI native agency is you're utilizing technology to do a lot of the grunt work. Typically people are the highest eaters of into those margins. So now having a service as a software business, you're in a really unique proposition or position, sorry. So margins have jumped, and we've seen this at LMO7 and Blackbirds. That your margins typically at a traditional marketing agency anywhere between 15 and 25%. 25% being like very good. Now moving to this model and utilizing AI, your margins just jump significantly. And with that, because you have the revenue multiple, you also have better margins. Your multiple just increases. So the opportunity upon exit is a higher exit value, right? So you have to really treat the agency as a technology company, but obviously have the service to support that as well.
For
So
sure. And
it's amazing to see in the numbers actually running Blackbirds,
yeah,
like this is actually coming to fruition.
absolutely. And I think, I mean, this is what attracted so many people to building SaaS products in the past. right? This is why everything that went through Y Combinator, all the people who made a ton of money building stuff in Silicon Valley, did so because they could achieve these kind of margins and then these kind of multiples on their business. And what people didn't necessarily go and do often was try and build services businesses because they just knew they were hard to scale, and it wasn't the easier way to get to these kind of revenue multiples and exits. Whereas that it's kind of, I think, flipped on its head to a certain extent. Now the big question is probably well, it's just not as big a team of people as you would have had previously to run a services business. But the question maybe is like, what does the token cost end up at? And like, does the token cost basically absorb all of that extra margin at some point in the future,
True.
and
Hmm.
bring it back down again? I don't think it will, but I certainly think it's going to increase. And I was just looking at the burn rate I had on Claude over the last couple of weeks, and on a Pro Max plan, I'd rinsed through all of the allocation that went to Fable. Then I started using paid for credits, and I did burnt through a couple £100 in the last 4 days. Just like I was trying to be fairly specific with what I was using it for on a couple of big tasks, but it did chew through quite a lot of tokens. But it's still cheaper than having another person,
Yeah.
right? In the
100%.
business.
Yeah, I've seen it actually. Well, the industry's seen it across, especially across tech. Obviously, there's been layoffs, redundancies, and that capital is getting allocated to tokens. And then what the big tech companies are doing is just hiring superstars that can run fleets, agentic workflows, take that money that's been saved and then allocate it to tokens, and then really the output's gonna be significantly higher. So, if you are setting up an agency or you are looking to build a new company, um, the key thing to do is to bring someone in, or at least train yourself up on how to utilize these technologies, because you will hire, but you'll hire less people, and your output is going to be significantly higher if you can utilize code, co-work,
For
dispatch,
sure.
all these different technologies. So you're right. It could change overnight, though, right? Anthropic could just like 10x their token cost,
Yeah,
but I don't think they will.
no, I don't think they will. And then, because there's some competition in the market. It's not like, so Claude is great. Love Claude. Wide open to Anthropic sponsoring this pod, as we said. But we should at least have like an affiliate link or something. But
Yeah,
Fable Frontier model or 5.6 like in the next day or two as well. So obviously that maybe they're lining that up so that as everyone taps out on Fable, then hey presto, they've got their next most advanced model ready for you to use instead. So I think competition will keep the token cost down. Again, on your sort of thinking around if you're starting a business now and how you're going to do it, you need to think about it maybe AI first or AI native. I think the mental model I've got is, first of all, you just want to be able to use the tools. How to use them? Like that's very simple. Just getting in and actually doing it, like playing around with the tools. It's quite an easy thing to do. Here we go. And then, following on from that, you've got like, how do you actually build all these customized workflows? And that's where you really start, I think, to see the productivity gains. The stuff at the beginning is like just a bit sort of fun and like
yeah,
it helps you do a few things, but doesn't really step change your productivity. Phase 2 is where that productivity changes, and we'll talk about what's on the slide here in a moment. And then phase 3, you're trying to become self-sufficient, and what I mean by that is maybe you locally host all of your data, potentially, and a model and the infrastructure to be able to do it, so that you're actually not using, like, you're not signed up to Claude, you're not signed up to ChatGPT, you've actually got the tech yourself locally. And then actually, I think if you do that, your margin in theory could go like
for
super,
sure.
like at the right scale, could get really interesting as well, because you're actually self-sufficient on everything, and token costs can go up. You're fully protected because you're just running everything in-house. It's absolutely possible to do that today. A little bit technical to get that set up, but I think that might be where we try to get to in the future, so that if Claude does pull Fable or a future version of it, or it 10x's the token price, you're fully insulated from that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And obviously, you've got the open models as well. People running them locally on Mac Minis and stuff
Exactly.
like this. So
I mean, it's an iteration of that, right? It's like, it's
yeah,
basically run a local model, frontier models, because like actually the one that's 1 year behind is probably good enough for doing all of the workflows that you set up a year ago. So like just run that locally, and then maybe you could even have one instance where you actually directly into Claude for a frontier version or ChatGPT for a frontier version just to try new stuff. But
Yeah.
everything else is like local model, local infrastructure, local data, and then you don't need to worry about what these big tech firms are going to do with the pricing.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. I think we spoke about this last time, but the configuration we've got set up is that we use different models based on the complexity of the task. So if it requires deep thinking, if it's kind of a task that needs a lot of thought and obviously some research, you can default it to Fable. But if it's just kind of run of the mill, just grunt work, then you can run it on a lighter touch model like Opus or whatever. But yeah, I think we spoke about this before. Some of the older models of those models or usage of those models is going up. They're kind of like pushing you towards frontier, like last release models. And they've obviously got crazy valuations now, so they've got to make some money, but who knows?
They have got to make some money. That is true. So where should people get started? There's quite a lot of let's say insight or advice on this slide. Where's a good place to start?
Yes, I think the top right is the most important. So look at your own workflows. If you've set a company up or if you're running an agency, and this a great example came from Brain Labs, it's like, what are people doing day in, day out? What are you doing more than once or twice a day that is taking up a lot of time? Look for those repeatable high volume tasks, document them, and then see if you can repeat them or build them into Claude or ChatGPT or whatever model you're using. Create skills which are repeatable, and then that's just going to make you much more productive, and the efficiency gain is going to be huge. And then from there, once you have that up and running, there's lots of other capabilities. And obviously, myself and you, Stephen, use Claude. So things like Claude projects, agentic workflows, obviously via APIs, Claude code if you're building as well. All of this is natively integrated in that kind of front end. So I think that's the key thing, right? Look for
Yeah,
those high volume, repeatable tasks. How do we, anything that has data and it's data input or output, you can automate the hell out of it.
for
So
sure.
they're
And
the first areas to look at.
absolutely, I really like having project set up. I think that works super well, especially if you've got different clients. You can have project folders with different information that relate to each of them, or even just the different projects that you're working on. And then you can, you go back to that project file when you start up a new chat or a task. And obviously it's got access to all the information previously, the chats, the files, etc. So that works, I think, super well organizing yourself with Claude doing projects. I like that setup. I like that. Using Claude to help build some internal tools and automations. You've got your project set up. You maybe been using it to build a couple of tools that are automating some of those high volume, repeatable workflows. It's actually a bit of a hack here, which is you can actually just ask what you should build. Say, hey, I've been using Claude for the last 6 months. You've seen the queries that I come and ask you every single day. Which are the ones that are similar? And, can you help me build something that automates the ones I'm asking you a lot of the time, and it'll give you, I think, some good recommendations about what you could build, so you could do that. But once you've done that, Chris, maybe you can talk us through, where to go next, because I think APIs and MCPs might be acronyms people know, but also might be things that people don't.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, kind of think of this like phase one, then phase two. And I think key thing in Claude that you can do is use connectors to obviously bridge into tools that you're already using. Very simply, you can link into like Google Drive or Gmail, and add in agentic workflows on top of that. Easy example is if you're getting emails from clients or emails from prospects, that can feed into a workflow within Claude, and you can kind of draft emails. Very simple use case, but you can extend that by 10x, 100x, 1000x once you start to bring in APIs, API connectors, and MCPs, so model context protocols. And that's really integrating into platforms you're using, ultimately integrating into data that maybe you don't have natively. And then from there, it's once you have the data available, you can do pretty much anything you want. And what we took the approach at Blackbird is we didn't want to be restricted by certain tools or platforms that we were using, and we wanted to build our own custom workflows, again, using agents. because the industry we're in was moving super fast. We needed to be able to adapt very quickly, and we didn't want to be kind of pigeonholed or crowbarred into specific workflows. So we actually built our own. So we use what is called a closed loop system. So anytime, I'll take a step back, we bring in a lot of data from a variety of different sources. We store them in Superbase, which is our kind of central database. And then from there, we've built a front end. So we use different technologies. We use Vercel, we use React, and I've built a software company, which is pretty wild considering we haven't been out in the market too long. But within there, we have the data. We were able to build and construct our own workflows for our clients. And a key thing we use is a closed loop system. So anytime we make a change or implement a fix or ship new content or we achieve a new citation, everything is tracked back to that individual element. And from there, we can see what works, what doesn't, and what we need to iterate on. And we utilize agentic workflows. We call them fleets. So fleets cover certain areas of the business, one being sales, one being delivery for our clients, and then the other on product. And then within there, we have agentic workflows. So it's probably a little bit advanced maybe for some people, but it's a great way to really automate the data that you already have, but in a format and process that works for you and your clients. So yeah, we've really taken the best of what's out in market, utilizing the data, and then really constructed our own workflows. And it's not that difficult to do. So anyone can really do that. And again, it's just the ability to prompt Claude, get familiar with using Claude code, and you can build out these workflows to suit your needs and obviously suit the needs of your clients. So yeah, it's a bit of a unique. Originally, obviously launching an agency, we were very service led, but then quickly we saw the opportunity to be tech enabled, and tech enabled media agency or marketing agency. So it's adding in that automation, which makes things like gross margins, making the ability for us to run lean but scale with clients, and do that in a very short time. I think we ran some analysis that what we've built is it's probably cost us a tenth of the price pre AI. So you're talking here like hundreds of thousands we would have had to invest to build the code base and to test it and obviously launch an MVP and general availability. But now barriers are gone. You can
Well,
do this very quickly.
for sure. And there's like a few things in there, which I think are super interesting. But first, like the word fleets, is that, so that's your word, is it? The
We
fleets.
coined it. It's a known kind of description in the market, but I think it lands quite nicely. Think of it like a cluster of agents.
Yeah, yeah, a fleet.
So a grouping of agents, basically. Yeah.
I was just thinking of like loads and loads of white vans doing out there doing the work for you. The
That's it. The grunt
fleets out
work.
there. It's on so like on the topic of like building and the cost to build and how much cheaper that is. Like, you know, the old model of like, hey, we need to build a thing, we're gonna raise a load of money, we're gonna build it, and then we're gonna see if we've got market resonance and if it's gonna work. Like that just doesn't make sense anymore, does it? Because the chances are like you might not have that right, it might not work. Also the beauty of being a service agency is you get to see what everyone's problems are. Like you're actually servicing, you're helping them to overcome those problems, and then you can build maybe to start with custom tool to solve those problems, but then it turns into a product like you built, right? Which is we're doing the same thing over and over again for all these different clients who had the same problem that they needed to fix. And then we just did exactly what we talked about in terms of building the business. We productized it because we realized that we were just solving the same thing repeatedly. And
Yeah.
so we built a tool that did that. And then you end up with, and that's how you end up with a product. So for me, this, well, first of all, you could just run a service as a software type business and just scale it out. But in doing so, it's pretty likely you're going to uncover a couple of things, or maybe not a couple of things, a bunch of things, the same problem over and over again. And you can build them while you're still running the service. You don't need to build in any extra, you don't need to bring in any at the beginning anyway. And then you can test it and you can have it out in market and you can do things way faster than if you'd gone, okay, we're going to build a product. That means we're going to go and raise a load of money and, you know, in the old model and then try and take it to market and see if it works. So
Yeah.
I think that again is what makes, you know, this service proposition super interesting right now. And either you scale it out as a service prop with AI, or you flip it into a product, which you're doing, or you do both, which is actually what you're doing, right? Which is you're running a service
Hmm.
business and you've built a product as well. And then, that product can have its own revenue streams on top. So super, super interesting time to be doing all of these things, I think, and be really interesting, in 12 months' time to see where we're at, because I know we've been following each other's journeys quite closely, and we seem to be like a little bit in lockstep. I'm obviously a couple of months behind you, but like heading in the same direction. So yeah, 12 months from now, it'll be really interesting to see where we've got to.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. The good example, we were seeing the same common themes come up around LLMs are talking about our brands. There's misinformation out there, so we saw that actually brand audit is a great opportunity before you do anything in AI search. Just validate and understand what the LLMs are saying about your business. So we built this really nifty functionality within Blackbird to basically look at the misinformation about brands in market across the different models, and then put in process agentic workflows to basically get rid of that misinformation and make sure you've got consistency across that particular entity. So it's, you see something on LinkedIn, you see it repeating, and you see it in other areas. You can then go into build mode and ship a feature in a product like within a couple of weeks, if not less. So it's yeah, it's fun. It's great.
For sure, and I mean on that topic of the sort of misinformation, or let's say uncovering what the LLMs think about your brand, which might not be true because of the information that's out there. I saw an interesting post earlier today, and it was on LinkedIn from a lady called Lucy Carter, who's head of performance marketing at Iris London, and it was saying actually, 2/3 of LLM visibility comes from long-term brand equity, and I thought that was an interesting way to frame it. It's because basically saying, like all of that content that's out there about your brand in the market, is being fed in, ingested, picked up, doing all of that stuff really well for a decade. Then of course you're going to show it really well. But if all you've done over the last 10 years is focus on some really, let's say, lower funnel ads, some performance marketing things just to try and drive sales, and you haven't built your brand properly, then probably there's a whole lot of information about your brand out there that isn't what you want the LLMs to know about or think about your brand. So I thought that was quite an interesting positioning piece, which I am starting to think more and more that whilst LLM, like converting people from LLMs is quite like a lower funnel activity, sending people through to purchase. They're doing the discovery phase in the chat. They go through, and then they're gonna pick up or make a sale from your site once they've clicked on the link. I think actually just getting in the mix at the first point, that is a more of a brand equity play across the internet, isn't it?
100%.
About having all of the right information about your brand in all the different places that it could surface.
Yeah, definitely. It goes back to that branding piece that AI search is transitioning from performance into that brand play. That you need to be part of that discussion initially, and then that will compound over time. So yeah,
And
it's
And maybe we're starting out agencies. How should we be thinking about our brand positioning so that our agencies are visible inside of the models?
yeah, it's a good question. And I've toyed with this. Like, what are we? Are we a tech company? Are we a marketing agency? Are we both? Are we services as software? Are we SaaS? I don't think we've really landed on exactly what we are, but I think starting from marketing agency and then just saying we're tech enabled and that we have technology supporting us to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but then we can focus on the important stuff, which is obviously strategy. So I think the naming convention we haven't quite landed on because it is quite unique. Um, but yeah, again, you say fast forward 12 months, God knows what it will look like. But I think that's where we're at the moment. We're kind of, yeah, we're set in marketing agency, but we have capabilities which are very unique from a tech standpoint.
That's it. I like it. Good stuff. Well, should we wrap it there then?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. We talked about things like pricing shifts, consolidation, the new moat. We'll be covering a lot more of this on our journey, our native agencies, giving you guys the updates on kind of where both our companies are at, as well as obviously giving you updates in AI search, agentic, and all things LLM. So, yeah, hope this one was useful. Episode 10 closing out here, and we'll see you next week for episode 11.
Look
Cheers.
forward to it. Thanks,
Bye bye.
Chris.